There we go. Okay. When you enter an address into Waze, you know that the next thing you hear is Bon derech. Let's get going. Let's get going. We are going to start in a moment with the Shara HaSefer, like the opening front page of the book. We're going to do that in just a moment. I'll put it on the screen, and I'd send out the link. You'll have that also on your phone if you want. The all the background that we spent some time on already brings us to this moment. What we didn't answer yet is why the Alter Rebbe, the Admor Zaken, wrote the book, which we'll talk about shortly. But what I want to do is start off and remind you that I mentioned a pasuk at the very end of last week's class. I mentioned a pasuk that we're going to see now on the cover of the book, or the title page of the book. Most times when you read a book, Sefer, this is one of those things that people tend to gloss over. They don't really read it. It's the title, okay? It's the name of the author. It's the name of whatever in someone's memory, whatever it might be. But the purpose of reading this, when a person learns Tanya, you actually start learning with the cover page, because he lays down the thesis for his entire book, and also shows it's based on one particular pasuk, which we mentioned last week, and we'll see again. But also gives us an additional piece of information or insight. I mentioned briefly in passing that the original name of the book, it's still, you'll see here on the top, is called Likutei Amarim, like a gathering, like a collection, a compendium of statements. Now, originally, I told you that when the Admor Zaken wrote the book, it was published, at first it came out without his name on it. And to say that he is a malaket, he just took information and gathered together and put it in a book, is a gigantic understatement. Now, he does quote from many, many places, Tanakh, Zohar, other locations as well. But his book was revolutionary. Now, you also notice it says Chelek Rishon right here, because even though this book we're doing is called Tanya, which we'll see why in a moment, it is just the first part of a much larger work, which we see as Igeret HaTshuva, Igeret HaKodesh, and other things that the Alter Rebbe wrote. And he also says, Hanikra b'shem Sefer Shel Beinonim. So first he tells us that, again, you don't normally spend time on a name of a book, right? But this is really important. If you ever learned the Chafetz Chaim on Shmirat HaLashon, it's important to know, why does he say, call the book Chafetz Chaim? You know, Mi'aisha Chafetz Chaim, right? So you move on from there, you get the translation of the pasuk, you understand, but here this is a little bit more in depth. He tells us first he's a malaket. All he does is he's gathered statements from other people. It's the first part. Hanikra b'shem Sefer Beinonim. This is called the book for those who are Beinonim. Now, I'm going to use that word very judiciously for the moment, because whether we get to it tonight or not, you will see that he's going to reinvent the descriptions and understanding of the words tzaddik, Benoni, and Rasha. What we have been used to, most people are used to, is you do more mitzvot than averot, you're a tzaddik. You do more averot than mitzvot, you're a Rasha. And in the middle, you're somewhere in the middle, you're a Benoni. Okay, and he's going to address that. So this book is meant not for tzaddikim, it's meant for the Beinonim. What does it mean it's meant for the Beinonim? We'll have to wait and see. And now he tells us a little bit more. Melukat mipi sfarim umipi sofrim. It is a compendium of information, of statements from various books, and also from sofrim. Sofrim normally mean authors or scribes, and it could mean that, but according to many, what it really is three people: the Maggid from Mezerich, the son of the Maggid from Mezerich, who was known as the Malach, and Menachem Mendel of Vitebsk. So these are three of his mentors from whom he learned his Torah. And I don't mean Torah by just like Bereshit Bara Elokim. And he has been able to take and to distill that information. And he's done this from Mipnei Sofrim, so Mipnei Sfarim, Mipnei Sofrim Kedoshei Elyon. I forgot, not Nizkar Eden, Nishmato Eden. That I guess Nishmatan, that their souls are based in Gan Eden. Musad al Pasuk, this book is based on the following Pasuk. And this is where it becomes critical to know these words. The Torah tells us in Parshat Nitzavim, it talks about that the Torah itself, remember Nitzavim is almost the very end of the Torah, and there's a lot in there. I mean, if you just take the Torah, and you read from Breshit bara Elokim up until almost the very end, it can be overwhelming. And even if you don't read the whole thing, but you know and you're aware of all the mitzvot and everything. So Hashem says, Lo nifleiti. It's not it's not up in the sky, lo bashamaymi. But rather, ki karov elecha hadavar, that this thing, the Torah, is very close to you, me'od, exceedingly close, meaning not just close, but accessible. Beficha, in your mouth, ubilvavacha, in your heart, la'asoto, to do it. Now, this pasuk, which we will be getting into some depth, obviously, shortly, this pasuk is the basis for the 53 chapters of Tanya. As we move through the book, we'll see how he takes this pasuk and his thesis fits with the pasuk, almost literally every single word having an extremely important aspect to it. And what's its purpose? Liva'er hetev, to explain well, ech hu karov me'od, how it is exceedingly accessible to you and me, b'derech aruka uktsara, in a long way and a short way. I'm going to leave those terms just as they are without getting into depth. Bezrat Hashem yitbarach. Now that last statement sounds like he's saying, like I'm going to start saying to you tonight, look, we're going to learn Tanya and we're going to learn a lot Bezrat Hashem, right? So that's what it sounds like he's ending with this little statement that Bezrat Hashem, I'm going to do this and show all this to you. So what we are going to be doing is spending a lot of time while we do Tanya with Rav Adin Steinsaltz Zatzal. He wrote a magnificent commentary on Tanya. We will be spending much time with Rav Steinsaltz, and I'm going to show you certain slides tonight that will expand on this introduction or this title page of the book. He tells us, until I tell you otherwise, by the way, anything you see, any slide I show you, all of them will be tonight, are going to be all from Rav Steinsaltz. This is one of the earlier versions. Wait, I have to see myself on the screen to see if it's coming up properly. Yeah. Okay, this is one of the earlier versions. There have been 2 more iterations since this original version, the Rav Steinsaltz. If you don't have it in your library, I recommend that if you stay with Tanya for a while, get this. It's now published by Cohen Publishing in a new version, which has 3 volumes with additional commentary on Rav Steinsaltz's commentary, and it's great. It really is great. It makes it even more accessible, because one of the things I said last week is that the book itself, if you were to just try to pick it up and read it and translate the words, it can be very daunting, and you won't necessarily pick up on a lot of things that the Alter Rebbe is saying. Okay, he said in this introduction, or this title page, Hanikra b'Shem Sefer Beinonim. I'm going to be reading from right over here. It says Shem Zeh. Shem Zeh shenitan l'sefer al yedei hamechaber. This name that was given to the book by the author, achen mevated yichudo shel hasefer, is really expressing the uniqueness or unique aspect of this book. Ha'amadat hamusag shel habenoni hu lelo safek hachidush hamachrias shel hasefer. The concept, the status of the idea of what is a benoni is without a doubt the biggest chidush or new idea, that is that which will be the machriya of this entire book. What's a machriya? Machriya is like a deciding factor. This would be the main issue of this entire book, is what is a benoni and what is its goal, etc. Ha benoni kishila atzmo eino musag chadash. The word benoni, you go to any Shabbat Shuvah Drasha, read anything in Chovot HaLevavot and everything, you'll see the word benoni, the quote average or the middle ground person. It's not a new word. Ulam b'ma'amad u'va'avana shu mofia b'sefer zeh. When it comes to its status and its understanding of the word as it appears in this book, hu mehaveh tafnit gedola minekudat hayesod sharov shitot hamusar. It's going to take us in a very, very different direction when it comes to the usage of this word. Hamatara shel sifrei hamusar v'hadmut ha'idealit. What would you say? You pick up, I teach Mesilat Yesharim, and some of you are in that class. Pick up Mesilat Yesharim, Orchot Tzadikim, Sharei Tshuva, Chovot Halvavot, name any book. What is the general goal? To be a tzaddik, to be the best you can be, to reach the level of being a tzaddik. And the assumption was in these books that it's possible. Lumatzot, Sefer Ze nechtav avur benonim. This, on the other hand, this book was written for the benoni. Avur ela shenam tzadikim, for those who are not tzadikim. Ach gam einam rishayim, but they're also not rishayim. Yesh bechach kein vitur al dmut idealit. This would seem to be that there's some kind of like a giving up almost, or overlooking the ideal individual. Shekol adam ra'i lo le'agiya eleha. That theoretically everyone can be a tzaddik. Look at the Rambam. Rambam says that anyone can be a tzaddik like Moshe Rabbeinu. They can't achieve nevuah. They can't achieve prophecy like Moshe Rabbeinu, but they can in fact do what? They can in fact reach the level of a tzaddik. Ach lo kol adam mesugal lachach. Not everyone is able to do that. Lo kol adam nidrash lachach. And not only that, not everyone is called to do that in this world. We'll discuss that. Instead, he's going to present to us the concept of a personality, of a benoni, that is almost an ideal, that also something we can all strive for. What do you mean you can strive for? You think like, Ribono Shel Olam. I know I'm not a tzaddik. I mean, I'm talking about myself. I hope I'm not a Rasha, so obviously I must be a benoni. What do you mean I'm going to strive to be a benoni, that this is a new concept? The muta benoni mekabelet kan mashmaut miuchedet. The character trait of a benoni receives a very different meaning, a unique meaning. Ha-benoni eno rak mimutza. By the way, don't worry, we're not going to just read slides tonight. Don't worry about that. There are a couple of really important in the introduction to the book. Benoni is not just an average. It's not one who is just not all the way to the tzaddik level or rasha. That's not even a compromise. It's not a kombina. It's its own being. It's its own idea. All other books, again, pick up any of those books I mentioned. Look at the benoni as a temporary time that a person might be, whose goal is to get past that stage. However, this book is unique in the fact its goal is to see to it that a person who's a benoni stays a benoni. I'm not going to read this whole slide. I'm just going to read it a little bit more. A person who is always struggling, internal struggle in his ways of kedusha, he never comes to a real solution. It's that kind of a person. Okay, I'm not going to read the rest of this slide. And he tells us that this whole idea of benoni, by the way, let's assume for a moment you were taking a class in physics, and I were to tell you about the concept of air pressure, and you don't know what air pressure is. So I just tell you, look, there's this idea of air pressure. It has to do with the force that the air places against something that stops the motion of something that's moving forward. So you get the idea, but you don't really know what it is yet. So all he says right now that you need to know is that there is a concept of a benoni that he's going to present that is very different. And it's based on a pasuk, which is, Ki karov elecha, hadavar me'od beficha ubilvavcha la'asoto. Pasuk ze'ino mamoto shel hasefer kulo. As I mentioned to you, this sentence, or this pasuk, is the motto of the entire book. Uyoter mekishuto sisma. It's much more than just a nice catchword or idea. Yeah, this book is based on this pasuk. Hu hamotif hamerkazi. It is the central motif of the book. It is keilu woven through the entire book on almost every page and every chapter. This pasuk expresses two basic ideas. Number one, open up a chumash, open up a Torah, look at all the mitzvot. It is achievable. It is attainable to do. You can't say, so many mitzvot. I'll try and keep a handful of. Hasheni, not only is it attainable, not only is it accessible, that it is easily accessible. It is easily done, and it's very, very close to you. It seems his perspective of this book is a very optimistic outlook. On the assumption that a person can do this, but not just to do and mechanically go through the mitzvot. What does this mean, kirva? It's not just karov, that it is accessible to you and close to you, but there's a kirva also that through the mitzvot, there is a coming closer to the mitzvah and therefore to Hashem. You're going to get a very different perspective eventually on what it means to do mitzvot and what it does to your relationship with Hashem. To change yourself, both in terms of the words you use, how you use your mouths and speech, and in your inside, in your heart. In a sense, to reinvent yourself when it comes to your service of Hashem. And then he ended that little introductory sentence by the words, Be'ezrat Hashem Yitbarach, with help of God. Very nice. But remember I told you last week that the brother of the Admor Zaken walked in and watched him. He was sitting there just like thinking, and he asked him what he was doing. And he said he was just thinking about this one vav, the word and. He was looking to maybe add or not add to this word. And he'd been sitting there for not sitting without moving, but had been contemplating it for 6 weeks, the letter vav, whether he should add it or not. So when he does put in something like Be'ezrat Hashem Yitbarach, and if I'm not mistaken, I don't think that appears anywhere else in the book, although it may in a different context. It means something more than just how we said, no, I'll be there Be'ezrat Hashem at 2 o'clock. What does it mean? It doesn't mean his intention by saying this is that he will explain all these things with the help of Hashem. But he means to say, that the things that he's going to show you and teach you and help you understand will be done in a specific way, that you only can do them with the help of Hashem. He's not saying, I'm going to do this Bezrat Hashem. He's saying you're going to be able to accomplish this only Bezrat Hashem. Remember I said that he finished that sentence by saying, I will explain it in a long and short way. He says it'll be, even though the journey that we are embarking on is long, because there's lots of things that are required and very specific things. Shadam yavod, viavod, viavod. Either that you have to work at this. Sometimes sometimes you get that spark where Hashem latches on, gives you that push to help him. That when Hashem jumps in and helps at that certain moment is not because you went through certain yisurin or other things in your life and things that were difficult, or even maybe certain of your avodah of working for Hashem. But it's Ezrat Hashem. Sheyesh ba gam tikva. It also gives us hope. A spark of direct help from God at that moment. Now, I want to give you a similar idea. I'm going to put myself on mute for a moment so you don't hear me clear my throat. Okay. I'm going to digress for a moment onto a topic that some people love and some people hate. He's doing it for 1 minute though. And that's the topic of what's called Gilgul Neshama. Gilgul Neshama is, in English, is transmigration of the soul. The idea, the belief that when a person passes away, their neshama comes back in parts to a new body for what's called a tikkun, to be rectified, for some form of rectification, to fix something that was in the previous body that that person didn't do. And many people tell you that the areas in which you struggle the most in life are the areas where your neshama is telling you need to do a tikkun in this area. Among the different, I used to believe until a number of years ago when I started reading and learning more about Gilgul Neshama, that person is born with a neshama, person dies, the neshama, one for one, that neshama is entirety goes into another body, Shalom Yisrael, move along. But I got that it's a very minimalistic view. According to most, and if you've ever heard of the Shar HaGilgulim, you'll know what I'm talking about, is that a person's neshama is made up really of an amalgam of many neshamot and parts of neshamot, and that they are there each in its own reason for a tikkun for those previous neshamot. However, in addition to that neshama, a person sometimes, while they are in their waking state or in sleeping state or whatever it might be, will also get what's called an ibur neshama. For the word me'uberet, like pregnant. What does that mean to get a pregnant neshama? There are times in life that you have gone through things and very tough times. And sometimes you didn't anticipate and you thought that would be better and it wasn't that good. And somehow you found the strength to get through it. And then things are calmer and things changed. So we are told by Arizal and others that idea is that at that moment that you needed that extra push, Hashem infused you with this extra neshama from a person who had a similar struggle, overcame it, and is giving you that assistance. Now, this is not the purpose of this book. That is not the topic of this book whatsoever. We will be talking about neshama and that as well, but we're not talking about gilgulim or anything of that nature. But my point is to tell you that Hashem will sometimes leha'anik, will just free will give us something. Here he's telling us in the beginning of the book that we will get the help from Hashem, the Ezrat Hashem, as we go through this work. Other times, it's, as I say, it's the Shar HaGilgulim tell us this other piece of information about the Gilgul Neshama. Now, my understanding is, and I'm not sure exactly why, that most teachers, when they teach Tanya, they don't read through the Hakdama or the introduction. I'm also not going to, but I'm going to mention one important point that comes out of the introduction. In a moment, we're going to start with Parak Aleph. But one comment that's very important to understand from his introduction, and feel free to read the introduction. If your Hebrew is good enough, you'll read it. If not, you can find it online or the commentary of Rav Steinsaltz or others. Why did he write the book? What propelled the Admor HaZaken to write the Shner Zalman from the Yadi to write the book in the first place? So if we go back, and this is why I want to do that background and that history of Chassidut first. We talked about this idea of the Rebbe. And the Rebbe held this, or also known as the Tzaddik. And he had a Chatzer, literally means a courtyard. But it meant that he had Chassidim, and his Chassidim would come and ask questions, life advice, when they had troubles, when they wanted to get closer to Hashem. And the problem became for Rav Shner Zalman was his Chatzer, his Chassidim were growing at a very, very large rate. At this time period, when he is early in his, quote, career, Chassidut is exploding. Remember that one of the things that was working against it, literally and figuratively, were the Mitznagdim. We talked about that. The Vilna Gaon was heavily against it because he felt like it was potentially another false messiah before, when the Baal Shem Tov was alive. But it starts to explode. And as it starts to grow, as we saw already last week, there are offshoots of different types of Hasidim. But the Admor HaZaken is unable to handle, and he says in his introduction, he's unable to handle the volume of the amount of people coming to him any longer. It was impossible. So he had to make a decision. And he decided a few things, of which I'll mention just two of them. One was that they're made certain takanot, that to see the Admor HaZaken, you could only see him once a year. If you're one of the Hasidim, you could only see him once a year, unless there was special reason and an urgent need that had to go through a committee that then allowed that person to see and meet with the Admor. The other thing is, he could not leave his Hasidim, nor the world of Hasidut, bereft of his love for Torah, his love for Hashem, and his method of how to get closer to God. And therefore, he decided to put into writing this book of Tanya, and the other books that go along with it. And he said in his introduction that everything you need to know, you're going to find in this book. All the answers, all the help, instead of coming directly to me. And then he added, and I mentioned this, I believe, last week, that if you don't find the answers, it's not like because they're not there. They're there, but you need someone to help you. You need a mashpia. You need someone who will be an influence in your life. You need a rebbe. You need a rav. You need someone who is in his derech of Hasidut to explain your answer that you're looking for in his book. And therefore, he decides to write this book. I want to start with the first parak, and I can put the beginning of the chapter on the front on the shared screen. Okay. Tov. So B'Shem Hashem Na'aseh v'Natzliach. Let's begin. Tanya, we learned in a Braita, which is like a Mishnah. We learned in Sof Perek Gimel Denida, on the end of the third chapter of Masechet Nida. Mashbi'in oto, when a neshama is about to be sent down to this world. The neshama is brought before Hashem. And the neshama is made to take an oath. Two parts. Tehi tzaddik v'al tehi rasha. Be a tzaddik and don't be a rasha. And part two of this shavua. Va'afilu kol ha'olam kulo omrim lecha tzaddik ata. Even if the whole world tells you you're a tzaddik, hayeh be'einecha kirasha. You should see yourself as being a rasha. Wow, that's kind of a bummer and a downer way to start a book. Yeah, you can be as great as you are, but you see yourself as a rasha. What's that?
Rabbi, isn't there a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot which says exactly the opposite, that you should not?
Yafeh. So if you look at the very, very next line, which we're going to get to in a moment, it's going to quote that Mishnah. So very good. So hang on one second. Let's first understand what he's saying here. This shvuah, this oath that the neshama is supposed to take, has two aspects to it. And by the way, one bit of, I don't want to say advice, one bit of caveat. Chapter 1 is more or less technical. It is going to present many statements, definitions, and many questions. Many of these questions will not be answered for months. It will be, when I say we, I mean he will be referring back to these questions as we move on through the book. But do not expect to have some of these questions answered tonight, nor next week, nor next month. It's going to be a process. Pretend this is like at Lahavdil. It's not even a good example. This is the syllabus, okay? And you look at the syllabus and it has 25 lessons. It's going to be more than that. 25 lessons, and it's talking about topics you have no idea. But we're going to come back to it. And the teacher the first day is talking about the different topics. So the first thing he tells us is that we take this shvuah, that we're supposed to be a tzaddik and not a rasha. The second thing is that even if you are a tzaddik, or even if you're not a tzaddik, and people say, "Woo, what a tzaddik you are," you should see yourself as being a rasha. And then he says, "V'tzarich lehavin," right here. V'tzarich lehavin. We need to understand some stuff here. We need to understand a lot of things here. Let's read through this. We need to understand two issues. First, Dahatanan. We have learned in Pirkei Avot, Perek Bet, by the way, as an aside, we call it colloquially Pirkei Avot. It's really Masechet Avot. It's just the Masechta of Mishnah. It's also the only Masechet of Mishnah that does not have halacha. Continue. So we learn in Masechet Avot, it tells us, V'al tehi rasha bifnei atzmecha. What Michal just said. The Mishnah tells us exactly the opposite. Now, sometimes the Gemara will say, in a Gemara situation, will say, look, there's a statement over here, there's a statement over here. Both are right. But these are diametrically opposed. Here you have a Braita telling us, again, which has the status of a Mishnah, telling us that the Neshama is supposed to take a Shavua, an oath, not to be to see himself as a rasha, even if the world tells him it's a tzaddik, And on the other hand, there's a Mishnah that tells us never look at yourself as being a Rasha. That's question number one. Question number two, even if he does see himself as a Rasha, wait a minute. It's one. Put aside for a minute that it contradicts a Mishnah. That's really a sad way to go through life. How is this a good way to go through life? You see yourself as a Rasha. He'll be sad. And he will not be able to serve Hashem in joy and happiness, which, by the way, will be a central theme later in the book, spanning a number of chapters. And then part two of this question is, let's say the person does look at himself as a Rasha, right? Aleph, the problem is it's depressing. And how's he going to be able to serve God in depression? And two, or the second possibility is, if he doesn't look like, I'm a Rasha, big deal. You know, there's an expression in Hebrew, im kvar, az kvar. If already, then already. What does that mean? If we came this far, I'm a Rasha, so what's the big deal? I did 12,000 Aveirot, so I'll do 12,500 Aveirot. What's the difference? I'm going to burn. It's a horrible way to live.
In for a dime, in for a dollar.
Right. In for a penny, in for a pound would be the British expression. So we start off with a statement and two questions. Question, I would say, is question one, and question 2A and 2B. Very fine. Ha'inyan. But ha'inyan, we need, he says, many hakdamot, many introductions now in order to understand what's going on here. I know I've used this example before, but those of you who have not been in class with me before will not necessarily know it. I've asked a question, and I'm going to ask those who've never heard this from me before to answer. What would you do? I'm going to take it off screen share for a moment. What would you do if you walked into a room and you saw somebody cutting another person's arm off? What would you do? Take yourself off mute.
Are you a surgeon? Has he got a problem with his arm?
I didn't ask you that. I just asked, what would you do?
I just said what I would do. I would ask these questions.
Okay. I'm not telling you to ask me. I'm saying, what would you do if you saw someone cutting someone's arm off?
I would ask him why he's doing it. Is he a surgeon? I would ask him, why is he doing it? Is he a surgeon?
I would try to stop him.
You would try to stop him, right? Most people, when ask that question, say, I would try to stop him. However, as again, Michal said, what if I just told, I didn't give you all the information. It was in an operating theater. He was cutting his arm off to save his life because it was gangrenous. Okay, you don't have all the information. So again, we don't have all the information here. We are not being told at this point, at this first few lines of Tanya, of what's really going on. What is this shwal about? What is this concept of a tzaddik and a Rasha? Why is it seen to contradict an open Mishnah? So he says, let's go back into the text. We're going to look at a couple more lines of the text, and we're going to have Rav Steinsaltz join us. I keep saying Rav Aviner because he's who helped us through Kuzari. Let's go back here. Okay, so I'm right over here where it says Ach ha'inyan. There's a way to hear, annotate. There we go. It's not letting me do it. Oh, there we go. Right there. Okay. Tough. Ach ha'inyan. You have it on your screen. I'm looking at it in my book. That's why I'm looking down here. We find in the Gemara 5 divisions, 5 types of Jews. Now, what I need you to do is to put aside every single concept you have of the words that are about to be used. Okay? If I say to you the word dog, you have in mind a 4-legged creature with a tail, hopefully happy, wagging its tail, barking, and wandering around the neighborhood with somebody hopefully holding it by a leash. But now I'm about to tell you that the dog is really a pair of glasses. So hold on. The Gemara gives us 5 divisions of Jews. Tzaddik v'tovlo, a tzaddik for whom things are good. I'm leaving these right now I'm just translating words. Tzaddik v'ralo, a tzaddik for whom things are bad. Rasha v'tovlo, a rasha for whom things are good. Rasha v'ralo, a rasha for whom things are bad. Ubenoni. We already know, some of you already know, that there are these 5 divisions that are mentioned, and I'm sure you've heard them come up, and of course you know Rabbi Kushner's famous book, Why When Bad Things Happen to Good People, the whole concept of tzaddik v'ralo, when someone's a tzaddik and things go bad for him, and the whole Sefer Eov, which may or may not ever have happened according to the Gemara. So we know these terms. So he said, look, I'm going to tell you right now a little bit more information. Upirshu b'Gemara. The Gemara explains, tzaddik v'tovlo, tzaddik gamur. A tzaddik that things are good for is a complete tzaddik. Tzaddik v'ralo, tzaddik sheino gamur. A tzaddik which is bad for him or bad to him is a good tzaddik that's not complete. Well, that doesn't make sense. Uberaya mehemna in the Zohar, Parshat Mishpatim. In Parshat Mishpatim, in Zohar, it says, Piresh, Tzadik Veralo, when it says Tzadik Veralo, Shehara Shebo Kafuf Latov, that the evil in him is subjugated to the good in him. Bechule. Ubigmara, hold on 1 second. 1 moment. I'm going to take it off scripts. Okay. I just needed to mute a couple. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so let's go back now. And I can't do that with on screen share. Tov. Now I'm going to read a couple more lines. And it says, where it says over here, Pirshu b'Gemara, right here, we go back. Pirshu b'Gemara, Tzadik v'Tovlo, lost the place. Here, Upirshu b'Gemara, Tzadik v'Tovlo, Tzadik gamur, Tzadik v'ralo, Tzadik sheino gamur. Urai mehemna Parshat Mishpatim Piresh, Tzadik v'ralo. I'm just repeating the last couple of words. V'ralo shehara shabo kafuf latov. Okay, so we got over to here, right here at the end of this line. Move up a little, starting over here. Ubigmara sof perek teti brachot. In the Gemara at the end of the 9th chapter of Brachot, it says, Tzadikim yetzer tov shoftan. That a tzaddik, their yetzer tov is what rules them or controls them. Bechulu, etc. Rishaim yetzer hara shoftan. A rasha is ruled by their yetzer hara. Benonim ze v'ze shoftan. But a Benoni is ruled both by the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov. Okay, this is a nice big mishmash, and exactly one of the reasons you need to have someone like Rav Steinsaltz or others explain what's going on, because there's a lot here. We're going to take a look at a little bit of, get a little bit of help from Rav Steinsaltz now. I'm going to give you what he has, and then Bezrat Hashem, because we only got a few more minutes. I actually have to go back to school tonight, believe it or not. And then we'll next week get my own commentary what I want to say about this before we move on. What I do want to say is, as we read through this, pay attention, because it's going to help us understand the basis of the book. So again, we're going back to the very beginning where it said Mashbi'in oto. We just mentioned that before the neshama goes down to this world, they make it take an oath. Ti tzadik, val ti rasha. Et inyana shel hashba'at zo, hisbiru ke'hamshacha shel koach milamala. It's been explained that this oath is not how we picture, like you go to court and you raise your right hand, swear to tell the truth. That's not what this kind of shua is. It's more of infusing the neshama with a special power from above, from Hashem, in order to overcome the Yetzer Hara and not be a Rasha. And then it says, that even if the whole world says that you're a tzaddik, you should see yourself as a Rasha. That's the second half of the oath. There are 2 parts. On the one hand, you should be a tzaddik and not a rasha. On the other hand, you should see yourself as a Rasha. Again, this wasn't any deeper insight. Right now, it's just a translation explanation. The Gemara now, which we just mentioned, trying to reconcile all these terms, Tzadik Viralo, Rasha V'Tovlo, Benoni, all this. Gemara tells us, Tzadik V'Tovlo, Tzadik Gamur. Let me ask you a question. Take it off screen share before we do this, and probably won't continue. When you hear the word tzaddik, this is not a rhetorical question. Feel free to answer. When you hear the word tzaddik, did you ever stop and think that there's such a thing as a complete tzaddik or an incomplete tzaddik? Did that ever even cross your minds? Yes or no? Not with any explanation, just yes or no.
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else?
No.
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 Not really.
Okay. Most people will say when it comes to a tzaddik, at least to a tzaddik, I don't know about a Russia, black and white. You're a tzaddik or you're not a tzaddik. And now we're finding out that there are gradations. It seems like there's a tzaddik v'ralo and tzaddik v'tovlo. It doesn't just mean things are going well for him, but as the Gemara tells us, and we're going to look at again next week, is that there's something that he has a certain control over in his life, but he's still a tzaddik if he doesn't, if the Yetzer Hara has control over him. So how does that even work? And why is he called a tzaddik? And yet you also seem to have a Rasha, where on the one hand, the Rasha seems to have a part of him that is kafuf to its Yetzer Tov. So why is he a Rasha? It means he's subjugated to his Yetzer Tov. So why is he a Rasha? And what's the Benoni? What does that mean? That both his Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara control him? Okay. So as I mentioned to you at the beginning, that we're going to raise many, many questions. We haven't answered anything yet. And next week, we'll also raise more questions and go more into depth of the topic of Tzaddik, Rasha, Benoni, what they are, based on his understanding, and then how it is that we reconcile those concepts with where he takes us in this journey in the rest of the book. Okay. Let's see here. So I was asked if there's an English translation to Tanya. The answer is yes. Actually, you can find it in the bookstores. You can actually find it online. I believe at Chabad.org might have it, but just type in online, what's it called? Tanya plus English translation. You will find. The funny thing is, I'd mentioned a couple of weeks ago that it's been translated into many languages. It's really, that's not accurate. It's been taught in almost all languages. As far as translations, there's English and there's a few as French and Spanish I've seen. But other than that, I'm sure there are, but there aren't a lot of other languages to translate into. That there's definitely English translation. The English translation in and of itself will help you a little, but it will not help you to understand depth. But if it's just to understand the wording, definitely it would help. Okay.
Mati Markovich, who has a bookstore in the Old City, will bring it home for you if you call him and order it. So
that's correct. For those of you in Ma'ale Adumim, the owner of Moria Bookstore will bring it home if you want to order from him. As far as I'm getting clarification, it wasn't just Tanya's in English, but the translation of Steinsaltz being in English, as far as I know, is not yet available. No, but maybe after teaching it for the next 30, 40 years, I'll sit down and start translating it. How's about that? There's another project. That's why I said I have to live to be 35,000 years old. I have so many things to do. Okay. Should be Hatzlacha. Should be a wonderful evening and day tomorrow. And Bezrat Hashem, for those of you in Mesilat Hashem, I'll see you tomorrow. Navi, I'll see you Sunday. And Bezrat Hashem next week, Tuesday night for Tanya. Have a great evening.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Thanks, Rabbi.
You're welcome.